Well, the Australian Banking Association is pushing for tougher laws to protect seniors against financial abuse. They're running a campaign to change power of attorney laws to make sure the money stays safe. It comes as a YouGov research poll found almost 60% of Australians are worried that someone they know will be the victim of this abuse. I spoke to National Seniors CEO, Professor John McCallum, and asked him whether he supports these calls.
Very much supportive of it from National Seniors' point of view. We have a situation where we need to deal with what is a growing phenomenon of elder abuse. It's growing particularly because of the internet. Look, I did the first prevalent study of elder abuse in 1990, so it's about 20 years since then. And whilst there's been a lot of information, a lot of training and so on, we haven't really got on top of preventing it. And prevention, is a tricky thing. So what we need to do is really get behind the Australian Banking Association and others who are saying that if you can give us the powers of attorney that can work, we can help prevent people being caught up, in their case, in financial abuse, but in other cases, in other forms of abuse.
How big, then, of a problem is financial abuse currently in Australia?
Look, it's a bit hard to tell because this is hidden. It's very shameful for older people to have to say, look, I've been scammed or my children have taken my money away from me. So it's very hidden. It's hard to get really a prevalence rate for it. But what we can be quite sure of is that it's growing because of the internet. Look, we have members in our National Seniors membership who are getting 2 or 3 scams coming at them a week. It's just unbelievable what's being done, and these are done on a massive basis. It can be done from anywhere in the world at any time. And it's not like it used to be, which was in domestic circumstances in your suburb or your town. This is now coming from all over the world, so it's certainly growing.
You mentioned scams. What are some of the most prevalent forms, then, of this type of abuse?
So I think some of the prevalent forms are very obvious, like financial abuse, and this can be from a very subtle thing within a family saying, do you really want to take that expensive holiday, or do you really need that new car, with a sort of a threat you mightn't see the grandchildren, to something that is really robbery with assault and battery. So it can go right, all the spectrum there, right along the way. So I think that's the first, which is financial abuse. Physical abuse is obviously very common as well when people become frustrated, particularly when they're not really understanding of people having dementia and how to manage it. Neglect is also one where people don't do things and people who need help can't get it. And there's a range of other things. Emotional abuse, of course, the full range of things that you can have in that spectrum of affairs, of course. Many older people are able to handle this sometimes, but some aren't.
Are the ABA's proposals just a start, or what more can be done?
Well, I think we have. It's a real bit of an octopus, isn't it, with all those different types and different circumstances, different situations. So we need to fix on something that can work. Now, the government doesn't get into people's houses; it can't deal with abuse. But we know that older people use banks right to late in life, and they're most likely to appear at a bank when there's some circumstance around abuse occurring, particularly financial abuse, but not only financial abuse. And it's not only banks, it's any frontline workers who really care about people and who see this coming. Now, if they're trying to do something, so somebody comes in, for example, says, I need to send money to the poor man in Nigeria whose mother's very sick, or to a young woman in Russia who has to have an operation, the banks know that this is not right. What can they do if the person keeps insisting that I'm going to do this, whether you like it or not, and they're really sick and I really like this person? Unless we have powers of attorney, that is where people have signed over the power on financial matters, for example, or more broadly it can be done in enduring powers of attorney where people expect that they might lose their competence to make decisions. Unless we have a system of that works, the frontline staff who really want to help can't help at all, and that's where prevention can happen. That's where we really need the action to be. The problem is powers of attorney are different in every state. There's no central record, so that we don't know whether we have the most recent one. There's no standard form around Australia, so some of these are done and they're unusable, they're not legally defensible. So that's the point, I think, where we can begin to deal with this scourge of elder abuse, which is growing.
Earlier this year, you spoke at the National Elder Abuse Conference, and one of the points you made was that financial abusers are being given a free run in the interim. Is there anything else that can be done right now? How critical is it then to fast-track these sorts of recommendations?
Well, I think what we can do, outside getting the Attorney General, Christian Porter, to lead the States and Territories Attorney General to really tidy up this thing. And look, we're way out of date. We live in an international environment and we can't even get our national system of powers of attorney together. That does need to be fixed. Apart from that, looking at the consumer, if you like, the person, we found in our study of particularly of scams coming on the internet and phone that people are becoming more and more resilient. They're talking to one another. They're taking advice from organisations that are telling them what to do and what not to do. That is, don't open a suspicious email. If it looks too good to be true, it is too good to be true. It's probably a scam. Don't touch it. So people are becoming much more resilient and resisting these things. Good thing they are, because they're getting so many now. So I think that's the other side of this, that we can inform people better and tell them how to address these problems and how to deal with it. I think it's really quite a shame that there's so much of this coming in, which is illegal behaviour, which we can't do anything about.
And just finally, what would be your advice to someone who suspects that an elderly loved one or a friend may be suffering from financial abuse?
I think you need to report it, depending upon the level of it, report it to a responsible party, particularly if it were a financial abuse to the police, for example, so we can get something done. There are hotlines that are readily available, so they can be easily looked up. There's a whole range of them. Or you can go to organisations where you have trusted, authoritative figures, so your clubs, your groups that deal with these things. It's that sort of thing that's very domestic and has to be dealt with fairly locally.
National Senior CEO Professor John McCallum, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.